The topic of this visual essay is the portrait of women in film. Film, the most popular medium of the century, has allowed people to see women in a different light. Michel Foucault has proposed the theory of power discourse. Having the right to disseminate information is the same as having the right to make rules. Laura Mulvey examined the portrayal of women in film in visual pleasure and narrative cinema, presenting the famous theory of the male gaze. This video will be divided into two main parts, the male gaze and the female gaze. Part 1. Female characters and the male gaze in traditional cinema. Men take on the roles of protagonists and heroes in most mainstream films. They are the active party, as their actions drive the story forward. Women usually play the role of outsiders in a male-dominated social structure, valued only for their beauty and sexual attractiveness. The female characters are often portrayed as waiting to be recruited to drive the story forward and are used to set up the hero's heroic image. The male gaze is the idea that there is always someone who gets a voyeuristic pleasure from women. This is dictated by a patriarchal society. Released in 1997, Lolita can serve as a model for the male gaze. The audience gazes at Lolita, the young girl sprawled out in the garden reading a book, through the eyes of the male protagonist. As a woman, I felt very uncomfortable while watching this film, not just because of the amount of unequal voyeurism contained within, but also because I felt that film was a figment of the hero's own imagination. He feels it's right, but never gives Lolita the choice. This is a story told from a pedophile's point of view. How can you call it love when a relationship arises from such a distorted and unequal position? Take Transformers, for example, a scene where the heroine is supposed to show off her car repair skills. But the camera keeps filming her figure and the male protagonist's voyeuristic look, which is a perfect example of the male gaze. If there is one phrase that sums up the male gaze, Mulvey thinks, the presence of a woman is an indispensable element of spectacle in normal narrative film. Yet her visual presence tends to work against the development of a storyline, to freeze the flow of action in moments of erotic contemplation. Part 2. Feminist Cinema. In my opinion, feminist cinema generally satisfies two main characteristics. On the one hand, they present a female position, and on the other hand, the films are mainly praising or sympathizing with women. An example is Portrait of a Lady on Fire, a film about an 18th century French aristocratic lady and a painter who fall in love, with all four main characters being women. The film opens by suggesting that Heloise had a sister who was forced to marry and committed suicide by jumping off a cliff. Heloise's initial emotion was grief over her fate and that of her sister, which was the reason for refusing to paint. The Marianne arrives and the two subsequently develop feelings for each other. So there was some disappointment when she saw Marianne's first painting. Heloise felt that Marianne's particular gaze on her was motivated by painting. In the first painting, Heloise is shown in a submissive manner and with her hands clasped in a submissive gesture. The painting was the image of a good wife and mother that man dreamed of at the time. But Heloise did not want anyone to think of her in that way. The film wants to convey a patriarchal male gaze, and Marianne becomes the embodiment of the male gaze. In John Peterburger's ways of seeing, he suggests that men look at women watch themselves being looked at. This determines not only most relations between men and women, but also the relation of women to themselves. He sees the female gaze as dual, encompassing both the self-gaze and the male gaze. In the film, Marianne says that she was not allowed to paint the male nude, which proves that women were not allowed to gaze at men at that time. Heloise is a woman who wants to resist this male gaze. This is why the second painting, which Marianne painted after getting to know Heloise, shows a very different image of Heloise. Women have been destined to be gazed at by men since time immemorial. As Heloise's mother said, her portrait came to her husband's house before she did. At the beginning, Marianne represents the male gaze, painting matchmaking portraits for Heloise. Marianne is the hidden gazer, always fearing that Heloise will recognize her identity. Later they open up to each other, and Marianne's Heloise becomes more evocative. Through the self-portrait, Marianne also began to gaze at herself, and Marianne and Heloise gradually awakened to a sense of femininity through their mutual influence. The character of Sophie, the maid in the film, represents the basic situation of most women in France at the time. The director gives us no information about men from the time of her pregnancy to the time of her abortion. And Sophie also shows in the film the kind of equality that women should be treated with. The first point of equality between women is the equality between the maid and the lady, and between the lady and the painter. The maid can play cards, eat and go out with the lady and the painter. The maid can play cards, eat, and go out with the lady and the painter, and even make choices for her own destiny. The second point is the equality between painter and model, breaking the stereotypical thinking of the model being gazed at. The painter is equally observed. The painter respects the model, and the model no longer exists to suit the painter. The person in the painting also has thoughts and values. The third point is the equality between lovers, between a man and a woman. A woman would have examined and reinvented herself because of the gaze of her lover. But between two women they see in the gaze of their lover self, they would not otherwise have that to affirm. Marianne sees the real Heloise and finds her true self in her gaze, a growth brought about by the equal gaze of her lover. In the final painting, The Farewell of Orpheus, the director gives an explanation.
Vous voulez la mienne? Il est très bien, cet Orphée. Il est en forme, votre père.
C'est mon tableau. Je l'ai inscrit sous son nom.
On a tendance à le représenter avant qu'il ne se retourne, ou après, quand Eurydice meurt. Chez vous, on dirait qu'il se salue.
Just as Marianne and Heloise choose to say goodbye in order to have lasting memories,